They called me into the meeting at 9 a.m., a calendar invite that hadn't been there the day before, added suddenly by my manager. It was raining lightly outside and the office air was as dull as ever. My name is Edward Lane. I'm 47 and I was the senior systems analyst at a certain company for nearly 2 decades. When I walked into that room, something inside me already knew. HR rep Nora was there, and next to her the new CTO, Craig Morton. He'd been around for 6 months, young, flashy, the kind who called himself a disruptor, always making slideshows, talking about optimization, but no one could quite explain what he actually did. "Edward," Craig began, "we have to have a difficult conversation today." I looked at him, waiting. "The company is undergoing cost optimization, and unfortunately, your position is no longer sustainable." Nora slid some papers across the table. "We're offering 2 months' salary and compensation for unused vacation days. You can review it now if you'd like." I didn't say anything, didn't protest, didn't flinch, just stared back at them with a calm I didn't feel. Craig shifted in his seat. "This isn't about your skills or your contributions, it's purely a business decision." "I understand," I said. "Good luck to you." Nora blinked, clearly confused. Maybe they expected shouting, anger, or tears. But all I had inside me was silence, or rather focus, because something had just shifted. Packing up my office took 20 minutes. 18 years of work fit into one cardboard box. A coffee mug, an old notebook filled with system diagrams, and a photo of my daughter from a hiking trip. No one made eye contact. Some stared at their screens as I passed by. Others already knew. Word travels fast. No one said goodbye. At the building's exit, I looked back one last time, then turned and walked away. At home, my wife Lillian met me at the door. I had no expression left on my face. "So," she said, "it's done?" "It's done." "What are you feeling?" "I'm not sure yet." Dinner was quiet, just the clink of cutlery and the soft rhythm of rain on the windows. But my mind wasn't quiet at all. A plan was beginning to take shape. The next morning, Craig called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. "Edward, thanks for yesterday. We're running into some issues with the system transition. We were hoping to bring you on for a short-term consulting role. Good pay. Let us know." No response. Later, Melissa from infrastructure called. "Edward, it's urgent. The server handoff isn't working. The database team's stuck. Can you help?" No answer. That evening, I opened an email from Craig. "Temporary consulting request. Our transition is proving more complex than expected. The new engineers are having trouble understanding certain system behaviors. We're offering $400 an hour. We'd appreciate your help." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. "You said 3 juniors could do my job." Well, let's see. What they didn't understand was that I hadn't built a basic system. I'd built an adaptive structure, one that evolved with time, that had layers, backups, and fail-safes. A system that worked because it was deep, not in spite of it. They never funded documentation. Said it was next quarter's priority. That quarter never came. So yes, only I knew how every module connected, which script triggered what process, where the critical keys were hidden. It wasn't sabotage, it was neglect, theirs. I sent a message to Nolan, an old colleague still inside. "How's the system holding up?" Reply came fast. "Nightmare. Maintenance queue is frozen. The kids are clueless. Craig's losing it." I smiled, just barely. Let the silence speak now. By the end of day 3, things at the company were spiraling. Craig's new engineering team couldn't grasp the system architecture. Logs contradicted each other. Users couldn't log in. Support lines were flooded with complaints. The automated maintenance scheduler was the first major failure, exactly as I expected. That module had been my personal masterpiece. It didn't just create tickets. It accounted for geographic patterns, property histories, supplier compatibility, and technician availability, all in real time. And the most important part, it was governed by a 2-tier control logic. One layer ran a timed job. The second only activated if a specific configuration file had been updated. No one knew about that file, only I did. And no, it wasn't a trap. It was the result of years of budget cuts and denied documentation requests. By the afternoon of day 4, Craig was in the operations center with his head in his hands. The screens around him flashed red. Job queues were timing out. Service requests weren't being processed. Payment systems had begun double-charging tenants. "Someone explain to me why this is happening," he yelled. Jason, the youngest developer, stammered, "I think there's a config mismatch. Or maybe the scheduler is locked out. But the logs don't make sense. It's like the system's resisting." Craig shut his eyes. The legacy system he'd wanted so badly to replace, it was fighting back, or rather, it was simply misunderstood. Meanwhile, I sat in my home office, sipping tea, scanning emails. Another one from Craig. "Edward, we're facing serious instability. Please consider helping. We're now offering $600 per hour. Anything you need, we'll provide." I didn't reply. I opened an old leather-bound notebook instead. Inside were rough sketches from the early days, hand-drawn diagrams of the original architecture. I remembered those nights, sleeping in server rooms, waking up with code still in my head, solving problems no one else could even define. They hadn't offered me a promotion back then, just a longer list of responsibilities. And I'd accepted. Now they were facing the reality of what I had kept afloat. That night, I received a text from Tara, CRM lead, and one of my oldest colleagues. "CRM's down, everything's timing out, no one can fix it. Craig's panicking, please help." I responded with one sentence. "Are they using the updated key schema?" She replied after a few minutes. "No, wait, no one even mentioned that." Of course they didn't. The schema migration was done 5 years ago, only in local notes, because the documentation request denied. Again, outside the company, things were getting louder. Arleston Residences, our biggest client, released a public statement. "Due to technical failures caused by our partner firm, tenants have experienced disruptions. We are currently re-evaluating our agreement." Craig saw the news and slammed his water bottle to the floor. The board called for an emergency session. Now it wasn't just technical debt, it was reputation damage. Back in my study, I read the updates from Tara, Nolan, and a few others still inside. The system was collapsing in slow motion, and I knew why. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was building something else. Then a ping. An email with the subject line, "Rebuilding Opportunity," from Harrison Blake, CTO at StoneGrid Solutions. I opened it. "Mr. Lane, we're aware of your departure from X Corporation and have long admired your work. StoneGrid is preparing to rebuild its entire infrastructure from the ground up. We're looking for someone with vision, someone who builds systems meant to last. Would you be open to a conversation?" I closed my laptop, leaned back, and smiled slightly. This was the call I had been waiting for. The next morning, I met Harrison at a quiet cafe downtown. He was composed, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, but not arrogant. We shook hands. "Mr. Lane, your system at X has become something of a legend," he said. "It was more than just code. It was structure, intent, and trust." "Thank you," I said. "It took time." "That's exactly what we're short on," Harrison replied. "Time. We can't afford to start from scratch. We need someone who knows how to build for scale, intelligently." "I'm listening. I'm offering you Chief Systems Architect. Full authority, full support. Name your team. Bring whoever you trust, and we'll build something better than anyone's ever seen." I nodded once. "One condition," I said. "We document everything. No more mysteries. No more tribal knowledge locked in people's heads." Harrison smiled. "Agreed." That afternoon, Craig called again. His voice was raw. "Edward, please. Everything's failing. Arleston's threatening to pull out. We need you. Name your price." I didn't answer immediately. "How many engineers are on your team now?" I asked. 7. "And 7 of you can't keep the system I built alone standing." He said nothing. "That system wasn't cheap, Craig. You just never understood the value." "Is this revenge?" It's education. And unfortunately, some lessons require failure." My first morning at StoneGrid Solutions started with sunlight pouring through the 16th floor windows and a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. This time, I wasn't there to maintain a broken system. I was there to build something from scratch. Right. Harrison met me at the door, holding 2 coffees. Ready? He asked with a grin. Ready's not enough, I said. You have to want it. That day, I gave my first presentation to StoneGrid's technical board. But unlike the blank stares I was used to, here I saw genuine attention. They didn't just want results, they wanted to understand the why behind every piece. Afterward, Harrison approached me and said, "We've been waiting for someone like you. Now we have the right time, place, and people." That's when I realized what I lost before had only cleared space for what was coming. My first task, build a team. I didn't have to look far. That night, I sent a message to Nolan. "I'm building something. You'll get the salary and the respect you always deserved. Are you in?" His reply came instantly. "Let's meet tomorrow." Then I called Tara. She paused on the line. I could almost hear her smiling. "Edward, I knew this day would come. I'm in." Within the week, I brought on 3 more people from my old team. People whose names had never been on plaques or emails, but who had kept the lights on for years. Now they would help design the next generation. We named the new platform Sentinel, because it wouldn't just operate, it would protect. Sentinel was built on one philosophy. Not just a working system, but a documented, teachable system. For 3 weeks straight, we sketched architecture diagrams, drafted data flows, mapped integration plans. Tara worked on interface documentation. Nolan designed the migration engine, and everything was written down. There were no heroes, only structure, only clarity. Harrison joined our sessions sometimes, but never interrupted. Just watched and listened. After one review, he said, "You do know that if you'd done this at your old job, they'd have silenced you in every meeting." "Here, I'm not being silenced," I said. "I'm being heard." And that made all the difference. Meanwhile, X Corporation was falling apart. Phil, an old systems engineer still inside, sent me screenshots of current logs. Core server queues were backed up for 48 hours. Background services were crashing, double charge issues were now legal complaints. At the end of his message, Phil added, "They're facing a class action refund case. Craig's gone." That made me pause. Not to feel triumphant, but to confirm that what I knew was always true. They never understood what they had. Then came the envelope from Harrison. I opened it, already suspecting what it was. At the top, preliminary offer review, acquisition of X Corporation. I looked up. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Harrison said. "They're worthless as a platform now, but their client list still matters, especially Alston." "If we do this," I said slowly, "their systems will come back under my care." "Exactly," I nodded. "Then we rebuild. Properly this time." The board gave me full authority to draft the transition plan. I wrote the report in 2 days. Every weakness, every undocumented process, every patchwork fix that had once worked but couldn't anymore. My final sentence: roughly 60% of the current system cannot be recovered, but the remaining 40% can serve as a base, if handled correctly. And I was ready to handle it. This wasn't about taking revenge. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was about doing it right. The system I once built was coming home. The acquisition moved quickly, but there was no press release, no big announcement. This wasn't that kind of deal. This was strategic, quiet, deliberate. And at the center of it was me, Edward Lane, the man they once let go with a cardboard box, now orchestrating the recovery of the very system they had failed to protect. StoneGrid's leadership team had reviewed X Corporation's financials. The verdict was brutal: 35% revenue drop, Arleston client contract on hold, maintenance costs tripled. Over 70% of system infrastructure declared non-operational, and yet there was still something worth saving: their client base. If we could transition those clients onto Sentinel X, StoneGrid would not just be a tech company, it would become an industry leader. Harrison and I sat down for a private meeting. "If we buy them, you'll lead the transition," he said. "Are you sure you're okay with that? Some of your old adversaries might still be inside." "I'm not here for them," I replied. "I'm here for the system." He smiled. "This could be the biggest project of your career." "Maybe," I said, "but more importantly, It'll be the most correctly done one. The deal was signed 4 weeks later. Only X-Corporation's senior staff were notified. They received a simple invite. Subject: Organizational Transition Briefing. I led the meeting. Inside the conference room were faces from my past, some surprised, others uncomfortable, but I didn't look for anyone. I walked to the center and began. We're initiating a transition. Most systems will be rebuilt. Some of you will remain. This is not personal. This is structural. A pause, then a hand went up. Victor Maynard, former deputy to Craig. Mr. Lane, he said, your overly complex systems are why we're in this mess. If you'd kept it simple, this wouldn't have happened. I remained calm. They were complex, I said, because the job was complex. But they ran for 12 years without a critical failure. The problem wasn't complexity, it was the lack of people who understood it. The room fell quiet. Then another voice spoke. Tara. She was now on my team, but that day she sat with the others. Edward's right, she said. He built structure. We failed to maintain it. Heads nodded. Resistance began to crack. That day I outlined the transition. 3-phase integration, 8-week rollout, one-on-one, training per department, full system documentation. This was not just another migration. This was a restoration. After the meeting, I visited the old server room, the heart of what I once built. It was aging, the wiring sloppy, monitors silenced, but I remembered every port, every cable, every redundant line I had secretly routed years ago. Nolan stood beside me. Coming in for one last look? He asked. I shook my head. Number, I'm here to restart it. Data transfer began. Nolan's migration module mapped old datasets to Sentinel-X. Tara restructured the user interfaces, eliminating old clutter. We absorbed, not inherited, the legacy. Select staff were retained. Talent mattered, not titles. 3 weeks later, Arleston returned. Trust was being rebuilt, one integration at a time. As for Craig, he had vanished. No lawsuits, no farewell emails, just silence. But he was never the system's architect, only a temporary occupant. Real systems are built by intent, and intent leaves fingerprints. Then came a new offer from Harrison, Chief Technology Strategy Officer. I declined. Instead, I proposed something else. Director, Technical Knowledge Transfer Division. Because this wasn't about titles anymore. It was about ensuring no system ever depended on just one person again. Brilliant, Harrison said. Let's begin. It was a bright morning with a crisp breeze drifting through the pine trees surrounding Lakeview Tech campus. I walked the main path with my hands in my pockets, reflecting on how far we'd come. Today marked 1 full year since we launched the Technical Knowledge Transfer Division at StoneGrid. In that time, 142 employees had completed our program. 47 had gone on to become system architects. Some now led teams across the industry. Others had quietly changed how companies documented their systems. And at the core of it all was one simple mission: make the knowledge live on. My first meeting that day was with Harrison. On his desk was a folder labeled Senior Technical Leadership, Retirement Planning. I raised an eyebrow. You think it's time? He asked. I sat down slowly. Not yet, I said, but it's smart to start thinking about it. Because the truth was, things no longer revolved around me. And that was exactly how I'd designed it. Later that afternoon, I stood in front of the entire new employee cohort in the training center. It was the closing session for our annual development program. As I walked on stage, the room rose to its feet. No clapping, no fanfare, just silence, full of respect. I pulled up an old system diagram on the screen behind me. A snapshot from 18 years ago, our earliest design. This, I said, was drawn by one man, late at night, alone at his desk. But today that system lives on through hundreds of minds, trained, documented, and ready. I clicked again. The screen showed the current architecture of Sentinel-X. At the bottom, don't just build working systems, build living ones. A young engineer raised her hand. Mr. Lane, you gave us this system, this foundation. But what did you get from all this? I smiled gently. I got to leave something behind. Not just lines of code, but a mindset, one that outlives any individual. That evening, I packed my office, not because I was leaving, but because I was shifting roles. In my drawer was a small notebook, old and worn. On the cover, my own handwriting, write code, but also write the story behind it. I left it on a new engineer's desk. I didn't even know his name, but I knew one day he'd pass the story on. The next morning over breakfast, Lillian placed an envelope on the table. No return address. Inside was a single card. Once you were lost in silence, but then you turned silence into structure, structure into systems. And now we walk within what you've built. Thank you, no name, no signature. But I knew. That's what leaving a mark looks like. And so, the man who once left with a cardboard box had returned as a system. And systems don't die. They echo. The full migration of Alston properties to Sentinel-X was our first true stress test. 18,000 tenants, thousands of maintenance requests, payment records, and historical logs. All of it moving onto a system I'd designed from scratch, this time with a team who understood every layer. It worked flawlessly. Arleston's CEO, Benjamin Keller, came to observe the launch in person. He stood behind the operations desk and watched the dashboards light up. "Edward," he said, "every time your code is behind a process, we feel it. It's structured, intentional." "I don't just write code," I said. "I build thinking into it. So it doesn't just function, it guides." He paused, then nodded. "That's what's been missing from this industry. Not speed, not automation." Understanding that evening, Alston released a public statement. "Thanks to our new system, our service is now faster, safer, and more transparent. We thank Stone Grid for leading the way." But far from the spotlight, in quieter corners of the industry, there were whispers. Former managers, disgraced executives, ex-colleagues still clinging to fading influence. They saw my return not just as a comeback, but as a threat. You see, I wasn't just back. I was being referenced, quoted, modeled after, phrases like, "Let's do it the Edward Lane way." What would Lane document here? Is this Lane level reliable? These weren't compliments to everyone. To some, they were reminders of what they never achieved and never valued. A week later, Harrison walked into my office with a sealed envelope. He placed it on my desk. "A legal firm sent this. You're going to want to read it." Inside, an official complaint alleging that Stone Grid had misused proprietary components from X Corporation. Signed by Craig Morton. Yes, him. Disgraced, fired, and now trying to remain relevant by throwing stones from the shadows. His new firm had apparently encouraged him to pursue a claim. "Let him try," I said calmly. "You're sure everything's airtight?" Harrison asked. I nodded. I built it airtight, not just the code, the records, the ownership, the transition logs, all of it. Stone Grid's legal team opened a formal internal audit. They reviewed every document, every version control entry, every archived system state. Craig's case collapsed before it even began. The few claims he did submit were either outdated or flat-out false. His new employer quietly let him go, no press, no goodbye, just erased. But that wasn't the victory. The victory was what came after. Because from that moment on, I knew what had to be added to our knowledge transfer program: legal awareness, ownership documentation, and the skill to defend your own architecture, not just build it. I gathered my team. "We don't just train system builders anymore," I told them. "We train system defenders. Because even the best code means nothing if you can't prove you wrote it right." Meanwhile, a surprising request came in. Lyra Property Group, mid-sized, forward-thinking, wanted to license our documentation framework. I usually declined those requests, but not this time. Why? Because their lead architect had once attended one of my workshops, and he had built his entire engineering culture on what he learned there. "This is your legacy," he wrote in his email. "We just want to carry it forward." By autumn, Sentinel-X was managing over 60,000 residential units, no outages, no critical tickets, no dependency on a single person. But more importantly, something else had changed. New engineers were meeting the documentation before they met the system. We no longer had to ask, what would Edward have done here? Because the answer was already there, in the comments, in the diagrams, in the training modules, in the very design philosophy. I was no longer needed to keep the system running. And that was the point all along. As for the shadows, they lingered, they always do, but they mattered less now, because when light is shared, when knowledge is open, shadows shrink, and those who thrived in darkness, they go quiet. The final week of the year arrived with sharp air and quiet skies. The pines along Lakeview Tech campus stood still in the cold breeze, and I walked the main path with my hands in my coat pockets, reflecting. It had been 1 year since we founded Stone Grid's Knowledge Transfer Division. 12 months of rewriting not just systems, but mindsets. In that time, 142 team members had completed our internal training. 47 had gone on to become system architects. Some now worked across industries. Others stayed and led product teams within Sentinel-X. But all of them shared one thing: they had learned how to leave something behind. That morning, Harrison summoned me for a short meeting. A thin folder sat on his desk. Senior Technical Leadership, Transition Planning. I raised my eyebrows. "Are you trying to retire me?" I asked. He smirked. "Just being proactive." I leaned back in my chair. It's not time yet, but it's smart to prepare. Because by now things ran on their own, and that's how it was supposed to be. Later that afternoon, the training center was filled to capacity. It was our final seminar for the year. All new hires, all watching me. When I walked onto the stage, the room went still. No applause, just presence, attentive, respectful silence. I began the session by showing an old slide, a snapshot of our earliest system map. Dated, ugly, hand-drawn, but real. This system, I said, was once just sketches drawn by one man at 2 a.m. It worked because someone cared enough to build every piece with intention. But now this system is not mine anymore. It lives in hundreds of you. Through your hands, through your thinking. I clicked to the next slide, Sentinel-X today. Modern, modular, documented. At the bottom, don't just build working systems, build systems that outlive you. A young developer raised her hand. She was new, maybe 24, smart, eager. "Mr. Lane," she asked, "you've built all of this. What's left for you now?" I smiled. I get to step back, because now I know I'm not holding it together anymore. You are. That night I stayed late, cleared out my integration office, not out of obligation, but as a mark of transition. I wasn't leaving, just moving out of the center. I opened my bottom drawer and found a notebook. Aged, leather-bound. The same one I used to sketch infrastructure designs during those long nights. On the cover, my handwriting, "Write code, but also write the story." I took it and placed it on a desk belonging to one of the new engineers. Didn't leave a note, didn't need to. They'd know, eventually. The next morning, as I poured coffee at home, Lillian handed me an envelope. No return address. Inside, a small white card. "Once you were silent, but then you gave silence a voice. You turned thought into structure. And now we walk inside what you built. Thank you, no name, no signature." But I understood. That was legacy. So here's how it ends. I was once escorted out of a company I helped build, carrying my career in a cardboard box. And now I watch systems I designed evolve without me. Because that's what real systems do. They don't collapse, they carry forward. And when built with care, when built to teach, not just to run, they don't disappear. They leave a trace.